Greetings everyone and welcome to my channel. I would like to thank all those who had subscribed and those who have left a comment on my last video, even though it was just one, and it's been a while since I've uploaded. It is for this reason why I'm coming back to do even more videos. So, like if you like, and subscribe if you want more. When I was a young child, I used to visit my grandmother in the country in the early 2000s. I would visit with my older siblings, my brother and my sister. I was about 6 years old the last time I went to visit, and it was the only time I ever experienced anything like what happened. Though I was young, I remember clearly. During the evening hours, my siblings and I would go to the playground to play with our cousins and the neighborhood children. However, I wasn't a part of everything, as I was the youngest child and found that I was either not interested or too small, so oftentimes I would play by myself. I did this for a couple days until I saw her, a little girl, just like me, standing by herself near the bushes. I ran over her excitedly and introduced myself, and she introduced herself. Her name was quite unusual, something along the lines of Clemencia, but I can't be too sure. We played every day after that. She never knew any of the games I knew, and I had to teach her. I also didn't know the games she knew, and she taught me. She was very unusual, but she was loads of fun. She never spoke to any other child and was ignored by everyone. On the last day I was there, Clemencia and I played like it was just that, the last day. When the day ended, I told her I was coming back again next summer, and she replied, "You will be coming in January and will never come back for the summer." I didn't know what she meant, and my young mind thought nothing of it. We said our goodbyes, and while leaving, I looked back and saw Clemencia going into the bushes where I first saw her the day we met, and I realized then that I had never seen her leave or arrive. She was always there at that one spot by the bushes. The next morning, my parents came and picked me up along with my siblings, and we went back to the city. A few months later, in November, my grandmother died, and her funeral was held in January in the country, which I attended. Just as Clemencia predicted, I've never been back since Grandma died. Fast forward to current time. I'm now in my 20s, and I met up with my siblings and some cousins over the weekend. We were talking about everything: work, relationship, family, and our childhood, which led me to ask my cousins, whatever happened to Clemencia? But no one seemed to know who I was asking about. The girl I was playing with at the playground, the whole summer I was there. My brother then said, "You were playing and laughing and talking to yourself whenever we went to the playground." My sister confirmed this, and my cousins who lived in the country for most of their lives said there was no one there with the name Clemencia. The conversation moved on just then, but I was lost in my thoughts. I remembered it like yesterday, playing with her, talking with her, even touching her. Could it be that I was the only one who could see her? How did she know I was never going to come back to the country? And who was she? Or what was she? I don't understand, and it's scary to think about. When I was around 10 years old, I had an unforgettable experience that still sends shivers down my spine. I am a female for context. I lived in the countryside with my family, and on this particular day, I was home alone with my mom. She asked me to go fetch some clothes she had hung out on the line earlier. So I made my way towards the yard and to the line and carefully folded clothes and placed them in a pan. As I worked, I suddenly felt like I was being watched. I looked around, but I couldn't see anyone or anything out of the ordinary until my gaze stopped at the woods, and that's when I saw it. A pair of yellow eyes staring back at me. I was frozen with fear, unable to move or look away. The shadows of the trees made it difficult to see, but as it started to move towards me, I saw that it had a mane, just like a lion, black in color all over its body. Its body was also slimmer, and its legs taller than that of a lion, and its tail was shorter. It may have been at least 6 feet on all fours. I have never seen anything like that before or ever since, and it's not a jaguar if that's what you're about to ask. This had a lion's mane, as I mentioned earlier, and was very tall, way too tall, the biggest cat I've ever seen. Time seemed to stand still as it approached me. I somehow found the strength to scream, and as I did, it started to sprint towards me. I turned and I ran as fast as I could, leaving everything behind. I didn't dare look back. I was too terrified. I made it inside, and my mom saw the distress I was in. She rushed over to me, trying to find out what was wrong. After gathering myself, I told her what happened. She went outside, looked around, and saw nothing. She eventually came back in, seeing that I was still scared, told me not to worry. It was just all in my head. But that was never in my head. I never saw that creature again. In fact, I lived in that house until I was in my 20s, and I never saw anything like that again. To this day, I'm still unsure of what I saw. I never heard of any black lions, and Jamaica doesn't have any lions to begin with. Jamaica doesn't even have big predators, except for crocodiles in a few places. So what did I see on that day? My mother told me this story when I was about 10 or 11 years old, and she recently shared it again, word for word. I am now 25 years old. It's a story about her experience when she was 16 in the early 80s. At the time, she had an admirer, Johnny Boy, they call him. His father's name was Johnny, so they call him Johnny's Boy. Johnny Boy, who was the same age as her, attended the same school. He would often tell her that he would one day marry her. My mom found him charming and handsome, and wasn't against the idea, as he was popular amongst his peers. He was also hard-working and helped out on his father's farm. One Saturday morning, my mother went to visit her sister, who had gotten married the week before. It was a 30-minute walk from her parents' house. After spending some time with her sister, she left around 4 p.m. As she walked, she heard dogs barking behind her. She turned to see dogs coming out of the only gated yard in the community, and they were coming straight at her. She tried to outrun the dogs, but they caught up to her quickly. She ran into the bushes as a way to lose them, but the dogs followed. Eventually, she lost them, but she was now surrounded by bushes, and so she decided to walk a little bit to the left, away from where she entered, so she could avoid seeing the dogs again. But she was still unable to find the road, and was now completely lost. Panicked, she tried to find the road again, but it seemed to vanish. She ran in different directions, exhausted and scared, trying to find the road, knowing that the sun would soon set and she would become even more terrified as darkness was approaching. She tried screaming for help, but couldn't get a proper breath out due to exhaustion. She then lost all hope and stooped down crying. That's when she heard someone calling her name. It was Johnny Boy. Relieved, she went over to him and explained what had happened, and he told her not to worry. She was on his father's land, the farm to be exact, and the road was just over to the right. He was not his usual jovial self, but rather seemed stiff and spoke plainly. He walked her to the road, turned around, and disappeared into the woods without saying another word. She turned to look at him before he disappeared in the dark. On a normal day, she would have questioned his behavior, but she was just too relieved to finally be on a road she recognized. When she arrived home, her parents were standing outside, worried sick, and so she began to tell them what happened. But when she mentioned Johnny Boy helping her, they looked at each other, confused and concerned. They looked back at her. They told her that Johnny Boy and his brother had been in an accident earlier that morning. Johnny Boy was unconscious while his brother was in and out of consciousness. Johnny Boy had been pronounced dead on arrival to the hospital, while his brother went on to make a full recovery. Many people who witnessed the accident believe Johnny Boy died on the spot. My mother was left speechless and began to cry, and in that moment of sadness, she couldn't help but wonder who she had really seen helping her. Even now, when telling the story, her voice cracks when she talks about Johnny Boy's ghostly appearance. Recently, she attended Johnny Boy's father's funeral, who died in his 90s and was laid to rest beside his son some 30 years after his passing. It's not the scariest story, but it's definitely a freaky and unforgettable experience.